Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel, please check out the link above to my Patreon page. I'll also put the link down below in the description. I'm here with a replay of a Modern League. I'm going to try to do this one a little bit different by putting all 5 matches in one video instead of doing 5 separate videos in a playlist. So please just let me know down below in the comments section which format you prefer, 5 separate videos in a playlist or just one video with all the matches in there. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into round 1. Looks like I won the die roll. We can close the graveyards to start things off, I guess. Let's see the opening hand. This is a mulligan. We don't really have creatures. We do like having AEther Vial, but not quite good enough. And this is pretty sweet. I think we're going to keep this hand and probably just pitch one of the islands. All right, so I think we'll probably just open up. Oh, it looks like the opponent mulligan to 5 here. So island, AEther Vial, pass the turn. Opponent goes Forest and Glistener Elf. All right, so this is the Infect matchup. They fortunately mulligan to 5, and it's an incredibly explosive deck. Mulligan to 5 will often not mean too much for an Infect player. They really just need a land, an Infect creature, and a couple of pump spells. So for my turn, untap, take AEther Vial up, play Oboro, and having drawn another Lord, we can just very easily choose to play one of these Lords. The 7 Seas version of Merfolk that I'm running right now is not particularly amazing against Infect. The fact that I have the Seas claims as 1-drop interactive spells, potentially landing on like an Inkmoth Nexus, turning them off of potential Infect attack, is pretty good. But beyond that, I mean, Thassa is a little bit slow, so here's a Noble Hierarch. It's going to make this Glistener Elf attack as a 2/2. And since we have the Benthic Biomancer in hand, we can go ahead and get him on the board now with AEther Vial. Benthic Biomancer as our 1-drop, definitely willing to trade him off with the Glistener Elf here. The opponent has a pump spell, he can go ahead and make the Glistener Elf survive, but he did not. So the opponent passes with no more Infect creatures on the board, which is interesting that they would have gone for their attack without a pump spell. I could have blocked with the Lord even without having Benthic Biomancer to Vial in, and then apparently without a pump spell, I would have been able to kill his only Infect creature. I think in that spot, assuming that he does in fact not have a pump spell in hand, he probably should have just waited rather than lose his Infect creature. I'm going to take AEther Vial up to 2. Drew another island, which is pretty terrible. Would have been nice to be able to loot that away with Benthic Biomancer, but very valuable to be able to just trade Ben right away for the Glistener Elf. So after playing the Mutavault, we can just crack in with the Lord of Atlantis and just pass the turn. There's really no rush to get this Lord onto the table. Odds are the Infect deck is not going to play any removal that can get rid of the Lord, so there's definitely an argument to be made that I should have vialed him in to get that 1 more point of damage in, but it's still a 2-turn clock from here, regardless of whether I vial the Lord in now or wait, and typically if that's the case, you just want to wait. The opponent has less information about what I'm working with, so if they don't know that I have another Lord in hand, they might not feel obliged to apply so much pressure to us. So here's an Inkmoth Nexus that is an Infect creature and a Blighted Agent. And with 2 cards in hand, we could very possibly lose the game next turn. Going to Vial in the Lord here. That's going to bring our power up to 10, but as I mentioned, it's definitely at least a 2-turn clock from here. AEther Vial will stay on 2, and Benthic Biomancer, a decent draw here, because we'd love some interaction, particularly a Merfolk Trickster that we could Vial in. So I'll just adapt right away, pitch this extra island that is not doing anything for me. And we drew into a Silvergill Adept, which, while not interaction, is another body. So Kraken for 6, we'll have lethal next turn if the opponent can't finish things out on their turn. And they just scooped. So a fortunate game 1, the Infect opponent mulligan down to 5. We were able to just mulligan to 6, and with a couple lords, they gave us Island Walk with this breeding pool, able to close the game out by turn 4. So pretty good showing by Merfolk in game 1 against Infect. Let's go ahead to game 2. All right, back for game 2 against Infect. Let's have a quick look at the sideboard. All right, as I mentioned in game 1, Thassa is definitely a little too slow for the Infect matchup. And Spreading Seas also, even though it interacts with Inkmoth Nexus, it is a little bit slow, and since I have the 3 Seas claims being a little faster, I chose to prioritize those. So took out 2 Reejereys, again a little bit slow, and 1 Benthic Biomancer. We're not always going to have time to adapt, so able to take out 1 Ben to make some space for better cards from the sideboard. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards out. I would have brought in my 3 Dismembers, my 2 Echoing Truths, and let's think what the other ones would be here. Didn't bring in Relics, didn't bring in Phyrexian Revokers, didn't bring in Kira's. 3, 3, and 3. And sometimes I just forget what the what cards I bring in from the sideboard. All right, back for game 2. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at the sideboard. As I mentioned in game 1, I took out 2 Thassas, definitely too slow for this matchup. Similarly, 2 Reejereys as 3 drops. They're still lords, still powerful, so only trim 2 of them. Benthic Biomancer, not always going to be able to adapt him in this matchup, since we're constantly using our mana in the first few turns. This guy's not at his best, so trimmed 1 of those, and trimmed a couple Spreading Seas, even though they can land on an Inkmoth Nexus, and thus are sort of valuable interaction in the matchup. I still have 3 Seas claims and 2 Spreading Seas left after sideboarding. So after taking out these 7 cards, I brought in 3 Dismembers, 2 Echoing Truths, and the other card that I would have brought in for Infect is the 2 Deprives. So 2 extra counter spells, and then 5 creature interactive spells with Dismembers and Echoing Truths. Opponent is going to be on the play for game 2. This is a mulligan, unfortunately, with 0 lands. And I've had to become, I guess I have to say, more disciplined about keeping 1 landers with the London mulligan rule. We don't get to scry. These are the 7 cards that we have to deal with, and it's a tough one because we have a Seas claim, we have a Benthic Biomancer, and if we rip a land on the draw, we could be set interaction with Seas claim, Spreading Seas, Benthic Biomancer. But I did mulligan because keeping 1 landers is just a really good way to lose with the London mulligan rule. We really want to have at least 2 lands in our hand, and getting to see 7 cards every time gives us a good chance to do that. I don't like mulliganing to 5. The opponent kept 7. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and put 1 of the islands on the bottom. We can afford to keep Waterlogged Grove, even though it damages us, because the opponent is doing Infect damage. So really, Waterlogged Grove is sort of like a tropical island here, because losing, with upside, because losing life doesn't affect us in this matchup at all. And then the next card that I would choose to cut here is probably the Lord. We can play a 1-drop with Benthic Biomancer and then curve into Spreading Seas to hopefully take them off an Inkmoth Nexus. But if the Infect opponent kept 7 cards, then we're going to have an uphill battle. Opponent opens with their own Waterlogged Grove and Glistener Elf. Seas Claim is pretty nice because it's interaction that we can play. So I choose to go ahead and do that right now. If, for example, they only have an Inkmoth Nexus in hand, we'll be able to deal with that with Spreading Seas and keep them off pump spells. We are definitely not the aggressor here, so I feel like keeping Benthic Biomancer in hand for the time being is reasonable. Okay, but they do have another green source, and they go for Noble Hierarch, which is kind of annoying because it doubles the output of Glistener Elf's damage. So it's going to be hard to stop this thing attacking as a 2/2 every single turn, even without pump spells. AEther Vial is a nice draw, but it's a little bit late. This mulligan to 5 is quite awkward There's another Infect creature, which is quite frightening. This is one of the new cards that Infect got from Modern Horizons. It's effectively a pump spell that gives +5/+3, turning the Glistener Elf into a 6/4 worm for the turn. And since that would make it into a, let's see, a 6/4, that would then attack as 7. It just seems like a good target for Force of Negation. So I'm going to pitch Benthic Biomancer, since Spreading Seas is at least interaction against the Inkmoth Nexus. And there's a Mutavault Croesus, so I'm going to go ahead and take 6 anyway. They have a Mutagenic Growth, and I believe that's the game. So they got the turn 3. It's going to happen against Infect some of the time. We did our best with the interaction that we had, but mulliganing to 5 is quite tough in the matchup. We're going to need, interaction and a clock, and as you can see, we had pretty poor interaction and an even worse clock. So let's go ahead to game 3 and see if that went any better than game 2. Okay, back for game 3. I'm going to be back on the play. And, well, we have to mulligan again, unfortunately. But this is keepable. I think in this kind of a hand, you're going to want to pitch the 3-drop, since we only have 2 lands, and all 3 creatures are pretty good. Looks like the opponent is mulliganing again in this game, and they went down to 5, so hopefully we've got a shot here. In game 1, the opponent mulled to 5, and we mulled to 6, so reminiscent of that game. Noble Hierarch, great to see on turn 1, means that we don't have to worry about taking Infect damage on turn 2. Another Lord is not terrible. We'd like to draw something like a Dismember. If they play an Infect creature, we can just kill it right away, but a Lord is okay, because we do need to attack to win the game. Need creatures to do that. Look at this Noble Hierarch is getting in here. It's a 1/2, so it's enticing to block it, but as I mentioned in game 2 while discussing Grove, Waterlogged Grove, our life total typically doesn't matter. All that matters is the Infect that we take, and if the opponent wants to start using their pump spells on Noble Hierarch, that's totally fine with me. So I am not blocking here. And yeah, I just took 1 damage, so looks like we're gonna be able to do pretty well here, assuming that the opponent doesn't draw any Infect creatures in the next turn or 2. Play another Lord, swing in for 3, and this is setting up to be a pretty fast clock. Pendelhaven doesn't really work with Noble Hierarch since it's not a 1/1, it's a 0/1, and Pendelhaven can only target 1/1 creatures. So it looks like the opponent doesn't want to get in with the Hierarch anymore. Another Trickster is nice here. I had to think a little bit about what to do. I chose to get in. Obviously, they're leaving Hierarch back on defense here. They don't have any islands yet, so Hierarch can totally block one of these Lords. And let's see if we can get some pump spells out of the opponent's hand. Okay, so Hierarch in front of Master of the Pearl Trident. Okay, they're going to lead off with Mutagenic Growth. That's still not enough. It's just a 2/3, so I'm fine letting us go to damage. They hardcast another Mutagenic Growth. So now the Hierarch would go up to 5 toughness. I don't really like that, so I'm going to cast Force of Negation using my mana, keeping my cards in hand. And he's going to tap the Noble Hierarch for the 3rd Mutagenic Growth. And that's totally fine. 3 pump spells trading for 1 Lord is fine for me. The opponent takes 3, and I've got 2 Tricksters in hand and another Lord. Okay, opponent plays a Forest and passes the turn. So drawing another island there is pretty nice, because we can play the Lord and then just tap down the Noble Hierarch, start pushing damage. I've got 10 on board, swing for 3, and then it's a 1-turn clock. So yeah, I mean, a really awkward mulligan to 5 on the opponent's side of the table. We were able to capitalize, lean on them with the Lords, but we mulligan to 6 ourselves, and we're able to get there. So the Infect matchup, I find it to not be particularly interesting. It's really just about if we draw our sideboard cards or not. If you get a couple of Dismembers against Infect, it can be impossible for them to win. Just because they might have to tap out for a Blighted Agent, and if you Dismember it, they can't even use the protection spells that they have in hand. So pretty lopsided depending on how the draws line up. And we were fortunate enough to get there in round 1. So currently 1-0 in this league. Please leave your comments down below. Let me know if I did anything really stupid. And yeah, let's just go ahead to round 2. All right, back for round 2. Looks like I won the die roll, so I'll be on the play with my 7 Seas build of Merfolk with Thassa. I've been mulliganing a lot in these first couple games, getting a lot of 0 landers. So mulliganing again, and finally we get some good cards, but we have to put 2 of them on the bottom of the deck. So since we have AEther Vial, I don't think we need both of these islands. Seas Claim is interaction. So, well, it looks like I chose to put Mutavault and an island on the bottom, keeping all of the spells and leaning on AEther Vial as a way to get things onto the table. As things stand, I'll be able to cast a Seas Claim, Vial in the Biomancer, and then Vial in the Trickster. So those 2 extra lands, not super necessary. And we do have 18 other lands in the deck, so Steam Vent's tapped. Could be any number of things. AEther Vial to 1, and as I mentioned, we have plenty of other lands in the deck. I don't know what I'm playing against. Steam Vents most likely means Blue-Red Phoenix, which is the top deck or the second deck in the format right now. I don't love putting on a land that can already make blue, but it looks like we're playing against a blue-red deck, and so taking them off red is the best that we can hope to do. I'm going to play that island, since I at least need 2 lands to adapt Benthic Biomancer and pass the turn to the opponent. If it is in fact Thing in the Ice, I could tap it down with Trickster, which is pretty valuable interaction. But opponent plays a Plains. It's pretty puzzling. I'm of course going to Vial in Ben at the opponent's end step. We get to untap, take Vial up to 2, and Thassa is pretty nice. We do have Devotion to turn her into a creature here. I'm going to adapt during combat. I have no idea what the opponent's doing, and if they want to path the Benthic Biomancer with the adapt on the stack, that means they have 1 fewer path to exile to deal with Thassa. So another Trickster, pretty clear choice, just pitch 1. Opponent starts taking damage. Another Steam Vent. So it's looking like some kind of Jeskai build right now. And since they're not really playing creatures, I'll just get the Trickster onto the battlefield. Tick AEther Vial up here. And Waterlogged Grove, probably, apart from Mutavault, the best land we could have drawn. Go to combat, swing in for 4. Opponent with no play, they just take 4. We're going to play the Waterlogged Grove. We can cycle that on their end step. The opponent plays Teferi here. That's fine. We don't have a counter. Let's see what they go for. Actually, you know what? I'm going to crack Waterlogged Grove in response, which is pretty smart. If I drew into a Force of Negation, I'd probably think about whether I wanted to counter it. I don't think I wanted to counter it just because they're not really threatening anything powerful with Teferi right now. So they're going to return Benthic Biomancer, which is a pretty strange choice since I get to get more value out of that guy. Okay, and playing Canopy Vista, for me, it started to clue me in as to what the opponent was doing. Teferi, his static ability says opponents can only cast spells anytime they could cast a sorcery, so it takes me off of like any counter magic. This is almost certainly like a Bring to Light Scapeshift deck. So they're trying to get white, blue, green, and red mana online to cast like Bring to Light with 4 colors, or just cast Scapeshift itself. And in the meantime, they're just kind of a control deck. So let's get Thassa in. She's going to scry on our upkeep, so it's pretty valuable. Since we're in a tough place right now, the opponent has 7 cards in hand. I kind of like that Spreading Seas, so I'm going to keep that on top. I'm going to hit their Canopy Vista, make it harder for them to cast Scapeshift, make it harder for them to generate all the 4 colors that they're going to be looking for. Silvergill was a good draw, but since we have Vial on 3, it's a little bit awkward right now. You can see with these Seas on the battlefield, Thassa is already a creature. So I'm going to hit Teferi with the Trickster and the opponent with Thassa. They go down to 9, Teferi's off the board, and I'm a little bit afraid of a board wipe, so I do not commit Benthic Biomancer. In hindsight, I think that might be too passive. We're sitting on 2 cards, they've got 7, they're just trying to ramp their lands as fast as possible, and we really need a clock, so probably should have played the Benthic Biomancer there. Okay, so Thassa scries us into a Benthic Biomancer, and we're really looking for something like a Force of Negation right now. So I put Ben on the bottom of the deck. Drew another land, unfortunately. We'll be able to potentially scry that, loot that away with Ben, but we're going to go ahead and play Silvergill first. Opponent has the Remand, which is kind of annoying. We can try to attack with Trickster and Thassa. The opponent, interestingly, choosing to go with Path to Exile on Trickster instead of Thassa. Obviously, if the Trickster goes away, we only have 3 Devotion, so Thassa will turn back into an enchantment, won't be a creature anymore. So it's a fine choice by the opponent, keeping us off of Devotion. It's going to get us a land out of the deck. And I think I'm just going to play Silvergill again, trying to draw one of these forces. But instead just kind of flooding out, despite having Thassa on board. Okay, so opponent's got 1 green source. Passes the turn after playing a tapped Hallowed Fountain. Silvergill, sure. We've got a lot of lands. We can try to... So I led with Ben here. Gonna try to loot away this land. Not cool. So we drew another land, really flooding out here. I think I was trying to not overextend, like try to keep a creature in hand, continuing the logic from not playing Ben the previous turn, and trying to improve the quality of the cards in our hand by looting away. Obviously didn't work very well since we drew into another island. We're really not getting great draws this game. Try to get in with Thassa and Silvergill. Opponent continuing with the same plan of keeping Thassa off of Devotion. If I had done that differently and played Silvergill and Ben, I would have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Devotion, potentially letting Thassa attack in. On this mulligan, in hindsight, I should have been much more aggressive. If the opponent has the Anger of the Gods, then you're going to lose the game, but we're already on the back foot, being 2 cards down. The only way I was going to win this game, I think, is by pressing my advantage on the board. And by only committing like exact Devotion to the table, I make it really easy for the opponent to disrupt with Path to Exile, turning Thassa into sort of a non-creature. So AEther Vial, pretty terrible. We draw into a Seize Claim, which will allow us to... So I'm gonna hard cast Silvergill Adept here. Opponent has Cryptic Command to counter it. No response there. And we can try to follow up with a Seize Claim on their green mana. Now, what they can possibly do is, if they have Scapeshift but not Bring to Light, they can't cast Scapeshift because it requires double green. But if they have Bring to Light, they can easily generate green, white, blue, and red. So pretty tough spot for us here. We're going to attack in for 7, or try to. Opponent finally paths Thassa, not particularly threatened by a single Benthic Biomancer. And that is, if you hadn't noticed, the 3rd Path to Exile the opponent had in hand. This is the, let's see, with the 2 lands in the graveyard, 1 in our hand, that's 3 plus 7, so 10 lands in the top 20 cards for us. And I think I sent at least 1 or 2 to the bottom with Thassa. There's that second green, and I think, pretty much see the writing on the wall. Opponent goes for Scapeshift. It's going to get Valakits and some mountains, and it's just going to, throw a lot of Valakit triggers at our face. And I scooped at that point. So I really think I could have potentially gotten there if I had just committed all of my creatures to the board instead of playing so carefully around a board wipe. It's possible the opponent had the Anger in hand, but just felt like they didn't need to cast it because I wasn't presenting that much of a threat. But it's always going to be difficult on a mulligan to 5. A little bit frustrating since our deck is set up pretty well to handle this kind of 4-color deck. We can disrupt their mana with Spreading Seas, Seize Claims. We can counter their sort of combo spells with Force of Negation. But the opponent was able to get there in game 1. Let's go ahead and see if I did any better in game 2. All right, back for game 2 of round 2. Let's take a quick look at the sideboard. So I took out, now this was, I haven't played against this deck in a while, and I took out the 3 Seize Claims, leaving in the 4 Spreading Seas to interact with their lands. The thought process is it's not a 5-color Bring to Light deck. They're not running black. So in order to cast a 4-color Bring to Light, they really only need to have one of each of the 4 colors, and keeping them off of, for example, green is going to be really, really difficult, even with maximum seize claims, because they run tons of fetch lands, and all they need to do is get one green source. They can play a fetch, get the green source, even with a bunch of seize claims on the board. So they just didn't seem like the highest impact card in the matchup, but it is a way for us to interact with their mana, and I don't know, potentially having 7 Cs against the 4-color deck could be good. Please leave your thoughts down below. Let me know what you think about Seize Claim in this matchup. They obviously already need access to blue, so not the most disruptive spell, but could potentially keep them off their colors. Interested to hear all your guys' thoughts on Seize Claim against 4-color Bring to Light Scapeshift. Oh, and I trimmed one of the Spreading Seas as well. So 4 Seize effects out. I trimmed a land since obviously they're playing Path to Exile. Still have the 4 Aether Vials to get creatures onto the table. And so let's see. That would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out. I definitely bringing in the 2 Deprives. And beyond that, don't need the Revokers. Let's see. 3 other cards. Oh, I think I brought in 2 Kiras, 2 Deprives, and maybe 1 Relic, just because I don't know if they're running a Snapcaster or 2, and it just seems slightly more value than the Cs that I took out. Again, interested to hear your guys' thoughts on the sideboard plan, but as it went, I took out 4 Cs and a land, brought in 2 Kiras, 2 Deprives, and 1 Relic. So I'm going to be on the play, having lost game 1. And yeah, it's a nice opening hand. I've got some counter spells and some Merfolk. Opponent mulligan to 6. We're going to play Island and Aether Vial. Stomping Ground, suspending Search for Tomorrow. Aether Vial up to 1, and Silvergill was a great draw. We'd love to lead with that. Continue drawing counter spells and more gas. Well, there's another counter spell. Things developing nicely for us. Search for Tomorrow takes down untapped Steam Vents for a Sakura Tribe Elder. That's totally fine in this spot since we get to get a Lord onto the table and attack right past that guy. The Steam Vents will give us access to Island Walk. So take the Vial up to 2. Land right on time is quite nice. Vial in the Lord, swing for 3, and pass with Force of Negation mana available, so we won't actually have to pitch one of our cards if we want to cast this. Okay, so opponent is going to get to... I thought about countering this, but ultimately chose to let it resolve. They get an island, play a Misty Rainforest, and go for Narset. Now, she doesn't seem super threatening. Obviously, it's going to let them draw into some potentially threatening things. But I'm valuing these counterspells pretty highly, even though I've got 3 of them. I'd like to save them for Scapeshift or Bring to Light. Or like an Anger of the Gods. Well, there's a Supreme Verdict, which is a little bit annoying. They're going to be able to get double white from the Sakura Tribe Elder and the Misty Rainforest. But I'll get it in at least 1 more attack. And since we know they have the board wipe, I chose not to flash in the Trickster. Another Lord would be awesome, but we hit another land. Still pretty good because I can activate Mutavault, leave up Deprive, even though I expect the only thing they'll be casting next turn is the uncounterable Supreme Verdict. I'll get in with everybody. The opponent can block the Lord of Atlantis if they recognize the opportunity, and they do. But we still have a pretty good clock, looking like we're going to hit them for 6 here. They get one of those white sources they'll need to cast Supreme Verdict. Cracking the Misty, they go down to 6. You can see we've got a ton of pressure going here. Narset's going to tick down again, and they only find a negate, which is good for them to fight against our counter spells, but we do have a bunch of them in hand. Okay, opponent plays a Valakut, and here's the verdict. So it's only a 2-for-1, which is sort of okay, especially since Silvergill replaced itself already. And going to the opponent's end step, we can Vial in Trickster, and then untap. Gonna leave Aether Vial on 2, and drew another island. It's actually not as bad as it seems because I can activate Mutavault here and again leave up 3 mana to hardcast Force of Negation. So opponent looks like they're actually taking it, going down to 2, and with 3 counterspells in hand, actually feeling pretty good in this spot here. Sakura Tribe Elder, choosing not to deprive that. Currently, we still have 2 damage that can push around Sakura Tribe Elder. And we can, of course, draw into a Lord, potentially. Instead, we just draw another island. At this point, drawing those islands, not the greatest, but looks like the opponent, rather than something like Path and Bolt or Path, Snap Path, just has a Cryptic to tap my creatures down, and clearly I've got answers for that. So going to hard cast a Force of Negation, attack into the Sakura Tribe Elder, and they'll take 2 more damage. And this is kind of typically how you expect this matchup to go. They struggle to find a board wipe. They do, but we still have some man lands and some counter spells for their payoffs in the end, and should favor Merfolk. And we managed to get there in game 2. Opponents sacked the Sakura Tribe Elder and then conceded. Well, no, they didn't concede. They just actually let the damage resolve and finished that without taking a point of damage. So pretty good game for Merfolk in game 2. Let's go ahead to the third game and see how the match ended. All right, back for game 3. The opponent's going to be on the play. And I believe I chose to keep this hand on the back of AEther Vial being excellent and me being able to cycle these Waterlogged Groves. I also have a counter spell for Scapeshift or Bring to Light, and Kira can be a good threat since they'll have to 2-for-1 themselves. In hindsight, it's sort of lacking in pressure and might be a mulligan. It's definitely a close call. But the opponent kept 7. They play a tap Stomping Ground and pass the turn. So Ben is a good draw. It's going to let us loot away one of these lands and actually apply a little bit of pressure to the opponent. Tap Steam Vent, so not a lot going on the opponent's side of the board right now. Another island is pretty terrible, though. Pass back their way, another tapped land. I'm going to Vial in Benthic Biomancer and use the mana right now. If the opponent lets the Adapt resolve, we'll get to hopefully improve the quality of our hand. And that Lord is just what we're looking for. So go ahead and pitch an island. One thing that I wasn't considering closely enough, I think, in this particular match was the fact that Scapeshift decks really want your life total to be at 18 or lower, so that if they cast Scapeshift with 7 lands, they get 6 triggers for 3 damage each, dealing 18 damage. If we have 19 or 20 points of life, then they need 8 lands to cast a lethal Scapeshift. And Waterlogged Grove is obviously going to do a little bit of damage. Fortunately, I drew another island. Sort of sarcastic there. We did not want to draw that extra island. Swing in with Ben, deal 2 damage. One plays a Forest and a Baloth. So I think this was kind of a critical moment in this particular game. I could let the Baloth resolve and Vial in the Lord and start swinging with Island Walk. So I think that's probably the best way to go, since they tend to win just by casting Scapeshift. And we've got the Deprive in hand for Scapeshift, but I chose to counter the Baloth, and I think it was just a mistake. So let's see how the game develops. I'm going to Vial in the Lord. Opponent is tapped out. Reejerey is quite nice. I did tick up AEther Vial because I might want to get Kira onto the board, but instead I drew a Reejerey for the turn. Going to get in for 5 here. Could potentially be 7, and then I would have 7. Let's see. So 4, 3, 3, 10 the next turn. It's still not lethal, but if they have a fetch, it could be. So they could be at 11 right now if I had Vialed in Reejerey. Opponent going for Search for Tomorrow. And then Anger. So that was the reason I did not Vial in the extra Lord. If I had 2 more Lords, I probably would have gone for it to get their power and toughness up to 4 to play around Anger. But the opponent does get to 2-for-1 us here. Actually, in response, of course, you want to crack the Waterlogged Grove. If we draw a Force of Negation, we could pitch one of these cards and counter it. Unfortunately, I drew Mutavault. So I'm gonna get my board wiped. And I'll start off with Reejerey. Kira, not super necessary unless we have creatures on the board to protect. Reejerey is a creature that we can protect with Kira. And also attack in if we draw another Lord. Reejerey can get buffed. Relic was kind of that flex card that we brought in post-sideboard. If we think about the role that those Seas would have played, in this spot, I could turn them off of white mana, which seems pretty good. So I got that Relic onto the board. No reason to run Kira out just yet. Going to cycle the Relic right away in case I happen to draw, I guess, another Reejerey. And I did make a slight misstep on this turn in playing the Waterlogged Grove instead of the Mutavault. We really want to be able to attack with Mutavault as soon as possible, and I was kicking myself for playing this Waterlogged Grove. I kind of knew that I was going to play the Relic, and then if I was going to crack it to see if I drew something like I just did, I'm just going to be stuck with this Waterlogged Grove doing nothing, and I won't be able to attack with Mutavault next turn. All right, so opponent is on 7 lands already. And let's see, they have a Bring to Light here, which they're casting with 4 colors. And we have no counter spells because I countered the Baloth earlier. So they get a Baloth here, which is an interesting choice. And I guess I have to vial in Kira here. With the opponent on 7 lands, there's a ton of pressure. They just gained 4 life from that Baloth, and things are looking pretty dire for us here. Ben is sort of interesting. We really want counter spells here, so I'm going to play the Ben and adapt right away. Okay, well, we drew another Lord, so pitch the island, but if the opponent just has another payoff spell, which seems likely since they use Bring to Light just to gain some life right now, we're in a bad spot, I think. Choosing not to run out a Lord right now because really all we want to draw is a counterspell, and I'm probably just going to cycle the Waterlogged Grove for that. Now, as I mentioned, something that I was not nearly as aware of in this particular game was keeping my life total above 18 against the Scapeshift deck. I sort of chose to let them attack with the Baloth and not block because I was trying to establish, a lethal attack on my side of the board, and sort of momentarily lost track of the fact that 18 is an important number. So we go down to 16. They crack the Misty Rainforest, and you can see they've got 7 lands here, which will allow them to cast the second Bring to Light. I'm gonna cycle the Waterlogged Grove. Did not find a Force of Negation. So that's going to resolve, and it's going to be a 7-land Scapeshift, which, as I mentioned earlier, is going to have 6 triggers and deal 18 damage. So this was a pretty rough match. I didn't play it as well as I could have, but going through the replays with you guys, I definitely saw some things I could have improved. So hopefully next time I run into the matchup, I'll play a little bit tighter. Hopefully you guys will as well. And I had to scoop there since we were going to take 18 and go down to -2. So after this unfortunate loss to a matchup that I think we're a little bit favored in, I'm currently sitting at 1-1 in the league. So let's go ahead to round 3 and see how that went. Okay, back for round 3. I won the die roll, so I'll get to play first. Currently 1-1. We beat Infect and lost to Bring to Light Scapeshift. This is a keep. It's a little weird, but I'll keep it. Opponent mulligan to 5. So I'm going to play an island and pass. They open with Faithless Looting, and mulliganing to 5. I feel like this could very easily be like a Hogaak deck or a Dredge deck. Faithless Looting is a really important enabler. So I'm going to play the Force of Negation and pitch the Trickster, actually. If they mull to 5 and only kept 1 land, this Spreading Seas is just a way that we can win the game. Another Force, a little bit weird. That land, AEther Vial is pretty poor. Opponent untaps. Unfortunately, has a second land. Still not quite sure what we're playing against. This could very easily be like Mardu. Overgrown Tomb could be Jund, I guess, now, but I get some Jundless do play some number of Faithless Looting. I think I saw Reed Duke recently playing with Faithless Looting. Satyr Wayfinder kind of puts this outside of the mainstream lists. So let's see what they put in the graveyard. Lightning Axe, Bloodstained Mire, Marsh Flats, and I think they put a City of Brass or something like that into hand. Seize Claim is going to allow us to continue attacking their mana. Activate a play an Aether Vial rather than activate Mutavault, just so it helps free up our mana. The opponent did not play the land that they got off of Satyr Wayfinder, which means that they've got plenty of lands in hand. Here's a Gravecrawler. All right, they're going to get in with the Satyr Wayfinder. Feeling decent about my position here, but I'm really not presenting much of a clock. Another Aether Vial is a huge whiff. I'm going to activate one Mutavault. Think about activating the other, but choose to leave Mutavault back and potentially cycle Waterlogged Grove. Opponent has a Stitcher Supplier, so graveyard getting filled up. Let's check out this card here. Claim Infame. So this will return target creature with converted mana cost 2 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield, getting value out of Satyr Wayfinder, Stitcher Supplier, coming back to the battlefield, getting those enter the battlefield triggers. And then Fame gives a creature +2/+0 and haste. So one of the downsides of Hogaak is that it's a big 8/8 trampler that doesn't do anything if they're facing down lethal on the next turn. Fame, cast from the graveyard, can give Hogaak haste right away and let him start attacking. So, pretty decent looking card in the matchup. An opponent starts tapping their creatures, which means they've probably got Hogaak in hand. I'm going to cycle Waterlogged Grove just because. I can't really do anything about this guy. But there's a Gemstone Mine. I think that's the land that they took off of Satyr Wayfinder. They get to cast Fame right away. Get hit for 10, and yeah, this went from looking like reasonable to just looking terrible in 1 second. Hogaak is a really unfair card. And even though we drew a Lord and are going to get our clock ticking, if we activate the Mutavaults, we swing for 6, they go to 9, and then the following turn, potentially attack for lethal if we draw another Lord, or if they crack a fetch land or something. But they actually got to dredge this turn. They hit a Bloodghast, and yeah, there's nothing I can do against this. So Hogaak's still proving to be pretty broken even after Bridge from Below was banned, and a pretty disappointing loss in Game 1 after the opponent mulliganed to 5. Let's go ahead to Game 2, see what I did with the sideboard, and see if I did any better in that game. All right, back for Game 2 against some new build of Hogaak. So it looks like I took out the Benthic Biomancers. We're not really the aggressor in these matchups, and I need to use my mana constantly. I'm holding up mana for relics, so we're not really adapting in the matchup. Trim all the bends, trim one of the Reejereys since he's a little bit slow. That's 5 cards out, and I definitely brought in the 3 Relic of Progenitus and then 2 Echoing Truth. With fewer sacrifice outlets, especially Altar of Dementia not really being played anymore, Echoing Truth can do a good job. It can bounce a Hogaak, make them have to recast it. It can bounce just multiple Gravecrawlers or anything like that. So Echoing Truth actually pretty decent against these decks right now. So this is a keep. It's looking pretty good. We'd love to have an Aether Vial to let us hold up mana more comfortably, but I'll just go ahead and get that Relic onto the board. Opponent opens up with Faithless Looting, and I'm going to be able to keep their graveyard nice and trim right away. Play a second island, and being on the play, this is not the crazy Bridge from Below combo deck, so I feel comfortable enough just tapping out to play a Silvergill Adept. If they use their mana just to destroy the Relic next turn, I can play a Lord and start attacking right away. Some of these decks even run Watery Grave so that they can run Hedron Crab, so some of them just grant us Island Walk for free. So feeling fine just tapping out here. Okay, another Faithless Looting. No second land yet. So an Assassin's Trophy and a Hogaak are they're good cards. Hogaak being in the yard is good for them, but they didn't have a second land even through 2 Faithless Lootings. So definitely feeling really strong in this position. We can play a third land to hold up Relic while continuing to develop our board here. So play another Silvergill, keep drawing cards, and get in with that Silvergill. Rather than play out the second relic, I chose to leave up mana to be able to exile Hogaak and the whole graveyard if I need to. Right, opponent plays a Gravecrawler from their hand, still no second land. A land on our side is pretty cool because it means I get to play out a second relic and potentially play a Lord and leave up mana to crack a relic, but the opponent just scooped there. It looked like they kept a one-lander on the back of these Faithless Lootings, digging them into more lands, and actually just whiffed, so pretty easy game 2. I think the opponent's deck just kind of lost to itself there. Let's go ahead to game 3 and see how the round finished off. All right, back for the third game against one of these new Hogaak decks. This is a keep for us. It's got 4 Lords. It's pretty strong. Opponent kept 7 as well. They crack a Verdant Catacombs, Untapped Blood Crypt, Faithless Looting, putting 2 lands into the graveyard. That's much better than pretty much anything else going to the graveyard. So very happy to see how that Faithless Looting resolved. We'll go ahead and play that Aether Vial. Opponent has a second land now, and shenanigans on the Aether Vial is pretty rough. That's also going to let them dredge. So now really we just need to draw into more islands, and the Spreading Seas is a decent start since it allows us a redraw. So go ahead, hit one of those lands, and there's a second blue source. So we're going to be able to start playing our creatures pretty soon. You can see how hard they hit their life total with their mana base. They're already down to 15. All right, they cast a Faithless Looting, putting 2 Hogaaks into the graveyard. It's pretty rough. Having drawn Force of Negation and Echoing Truth here in the hand, I'm going to leave up mana in case they cast Hogaak and then just bounce him on their end step. Citrus Supplier, going to put more into the graveyard. If they have another creature, well, they play a land so they get back a Bloodghast. So that's going to take care of the Convoke cost of Hogaak. And there he is. They follow up with an Insolent Neonate, and they don't really have that haste card available right now, so they just pass the turn. And as I mentioned, I'm just going to cast Echoing Truth, get Hogaak out of here. Opponent's going to have to fill their graveyard back up to recast that guy. So not such a terrible position for us right now. We, having drawn that 4th land, can play out a Lord, activate Mutavault, and start hitting them for big chunks of damage. We're going to be able to repeat this play next turn, getting another Lord, increasing the amount of damage that we're doing. They start off by sacking a Neonate, pitching a Gravecrawler. Don't have quite enough to cast Hogaak yet. Here's another Neonate. They sack that guy, and they pitch Shenanigans, and I guess, no, they pitch a Vengevine. No, they pitch a Shenanigan, and then dredged it and hit a Vengevine. So here is a Faithless Looting. I have the option to counter that, so I do. Opponent cracks Bloodstained Mire, casts a Gravecrawler, triggering Vengevine. And now, with 4 creatures on board, they can get Hogaak. But as I mentioned, we get to just do the same thing that we did last turn, play a Lord, swing in, and since it's not a 1-turn clock activating Mutavault yet, I feel like I can just leave Mutavault back in case I absolutely need to block something, play another Lord, and then I definitely have lethal on the crackback. So opponent just went straight to combat. They're going to get in with their whole team, which, if you count it up, it's 8, 12, 14, 16, 17, which by itself isn't even lethal. I mean, I don't think they're going to run lightning bolts, but we've got enough creatures that we can comfortably block here. In case one of the Lords happens to die, I'm only going to do it like this, where say they bolt or push or Assassin's Trophy this Lord. This Lord's only going to take 1, the Mutavault's only going to take 2, so they'll both live through 1 piece of removal. And here I'm only going to take 14, leaving me at 4. I've got lethal on board, and yeah, the opponent just scooped. So let's see, what were we able to do there? Opponent cast Shenanigans on Aether Vial, which was rough, but we did draw into lands. I was able to cast Force of Negation on one of their Faithless Lootings, which was pretty good. And they didn't have haste with Hogaak, and yeah, I guess they didn't have like 20 power on turn 2 or something crazy like that. So able to play some moderately fair magic and attack with Island Walk. So 2-1 in the league right now. We beat Infect, we beat Hogaak, lost to Scapeshift. Let's go to round 4, see how the league continued. All right, I'm back with round 4 of a Modern League, currently sitting at 2-1. Opponent is going to be on the play. They have a Mythic Avatar, which is pretty intimidating. This is a decent hand for us. We're going to keep. And it looks like the opponent mulliganed to 6. Okay, so it's humans. We really wanted to see an Aether Vial here to make some use of that Force of Negation. Unfortunately, it's probably just a dead card in this game. So opponent gets a Champion of the Parish down. We get our Benthic Biomancer down. And I think being on the play, being on the draw is going to be a massive disadvantage here. Okay, Thalia is going to make the Champion into a 2/2. So they're going to get their clock ticking. Another Force is another whiff. We unfortunately have to take damage from our lands. I'm just going to lead out on Lords because we need to get our toughnesses as high as possible to fight their creatures. All right, well, they hit their 3rd land drop. Here's another Champion of the Parish. And Thalia's Lieutenant, this is about as aggro as humans can get. And being on the draw against this, especially with Pain lands, there's not a lot we can do. So they went to combat, and I kind of just scooped. You can see 29 seconds had elapsed on my clock. And that's going to happen sometimes. We just got ran over. So let's see if Game 2 improved at all. All right, back for Game 2 against humans. Let's take a quick look at the sideboard. Looks like I sideboarded out the 4 Benthic Biomancers. Since we have to constantly tap out against them, Adapt, not really the most useful. Definitely took out the 4 Force of Negations. So I would have brought in the 3 Dismembers, 2 Echoing Truths, and 2 Kiras. Kira quite strong in the matchup, since some of their biggest blowout cards against us are Reflector Mage and Deputy of Detention. Being able to prevent them from bouncing our creatures or exiling them with Deputy is pretty amazing. And in a pinch, Kira can also sort of chump block a Mantis Rider. So 5 pieces of creature removal or interaction with Echoing Truth and Dismember, and then 2 Kiras. We'll get to be on the play this time. And this is a beautiful hand. We've got 2 Lords, Mutavault, Seize Claim to interact with their mana. Hopefully they don't have Aether Vial as well. They mulligan to 6 one more time. We're going to open up with Island into Aether Vial. Now, sometimes Silvergill Adept can be a liability in the matchup because you play it and you reveal Lord of Atlantis, then they play Meddling Mage naming Lord of Atlantis. But when you have Aether Vial on the board, it's not such a big deal. Okay, so opponent has Aether Vial as well. Seize Claim still very useful in the matchup because with the Lords, it's going to give us access to Island Walk. Another Island is right on time. I'd love to just lead with Lords right now. Threaten as much damage as possible, as soon as possible. All right, so opponent plays on Meddling Mage, and they name Dismember. That made me think that they probably have a Deputy of Detention in hand, which obviously Dismember, a great answer to the Deputy because we get back whatever he exiles. Interesting choice by the opponent there. Blindly naming Dismember. So we took Aether Vial up to 2. And definitely want to play Mutavault here. As I mentioned, just want to present as much damage as quickly as possible. Go ahead and run out Silvergill, revealing the Lord. Now, I probably could have done this a little bit differently. I was going to attack into Meddling Mage and see if they wanted to block. I didn't have a Dismember at that point, but now I do, and decide it'd be good to get this thing off the board because we'd love to be able to Dismember a Deputy of Detention. So I'm definitely going to attack here. We've got an extra Lord, but now the opponent knows about it, which makes it much less likely that they're going to block. And since they do have Meddling Mage naming Dismember, it would be unwise to Vial in Lord on my turn, because then they can play the Deputy, exile the Lords, and I'm stuck with a dead Dismember in hand. So I just passed the turn with Aether Vial up. Well, no, after I played Seize Claim, giving me access to Island Walk on future turns. Okay, Aether Vial takes up to 2. Looks like the opponent doesn't have a third land, so if they do have a Deputy in hand, they can't cast it just yet. Okay, Thalia's Lieutenant, not too scary. Phantasmal Image copying that Lieutenant makes things a little bit scarier. So opponent has a 4/4 Meddling Mage. They know I have another Lord, and I'm totally happy to trade off with this Meddling Mage here. Silvergill has already drawn me another card. That Meddling Mage is turning off the Dismember in my hand, so let's get that thing out of here. And I get to untap with 10 power on board. Aether Vial, let's see. Probably want to keep it on 2. We've got a lot of 2-drops. That extra land, not what I wanted to draw there. Definitely activating Mutavault, definitely swinging for 10 here. Making it a 1-turn clock. Opponent takes up to 3. And let's see if they get in. Makes sense since I have Island Walk. They can't block anyway, they're going to swing in for 5. And it looks like they just went to their end step. I'm definitely going to cycle this Grove. Maybe we can cycle into another thing to Violin. But it's just another Mutavault, which is sort of okay because it's a body. Okay, Aether Vial still stays on 2. Echoing Truth, obviously pretty good against these the double Thalia's Lieutenant. Play a Mutavault, activate it, go to attack. Trying to swing for 10 here. Okay, opponent lets me go to blocks, and then they activate Aether Vial. All right, there is that Deputy that I've been mentioning, and the Deputy of Detention works differently than some of the older cards that have exiling effects. It's very similar to the new templating that you can find on Freebooter. If I dismember the Deputy in response to its trigger, nothing's actually ever going to leave the battlefield on my side. So that's my play. Keeping the Lords on the table to continue attacking and presenting lethal. The opponent realizes there's sort of no outs, and they just scooped. So able to get game 2 against humans. Let's go ahead and see how game 3 went. Okay, back for game 3 against humans. They're going to be on the play this time. 5 lands is a unfortunate but necessary mulligan. But Aether Vial is always amazing in the matchup, so this is an easy keep. Obviously Dismember pretty great as well. So the opponent mulligan to 6, we mulligan to 6, and put one of the Mutavaults at the bottom of the deck. Opponent opens with Horizon Canopy, already going down to 19, getting Aether Vial onto the table. Seize Claim is pretty nice. We can prevent them from drawing a card with that Horizon Canopy if we want to go that direction. But let's see how their mana situation develops. Aether Vial to 1, and what do they got? An Ancient Ziggurat. So that produces any color of mana, so that's probably even a better target than Horizon Canopy, I would think. Okay, we'll take our Aether Vial up. Another island. It makes sense to lead with the Mutavault here. Potentially you want to attack with it soon. And let's go ahead and get Seize Claim on that Ziggurat. Thassa is still in the deck post-sideboarding, so getting Devotion established, pretty relevant. Okay, opponent just vials in a harmless Noble Hierarch and immediately cycles Horizon Canopy, so seems like they're not super happy with the contents of their hand. Take Aether Vial up to 2, play a basic Plains, and we see a Deputy of Detention here going after my Aether Vial. So this thing is going to be really useful for us to get creatures onto the battlefield while holding up mana, potentially activating Mutavault, casting things like Echoing Truth and Dismember. So as you saw in the second game, because of the templating of Deputy of Detentions, we can see it says, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls and all other non-land permanents that player controls with the same name as that permanent until Deputy of Detention leaves the battlefield. So if it's never on the battlefield with the with the ability on the stack, it just never leaves the battlefield. It's just the way it works. So I'd really love to keep that Aether Vial, so I'm just gonna dismember this guy. Again, with the ability on the stack, so my Aether Vial will stick around. Pretty solid. Opponent's down to 3 cards. We are as well, but we're going to our draw step here. And Kira is pretty sweet because she's gonna hopefully help us protect our creatures against Vialed in Reflector Mages and other kind of garbage like that. So we can go ahead and cast her right now. We'd prefer to keep the AEther Vial on too. Opponent ticks up to 3, and, you know, we're hoping to dodge like double Reflector Mage into Deputy, that kind of stuff. Thalia is totally fine. We've got enough mana if we want to cast Echoing Truth. We're hoping... Okay, so here's another Deputy, and the only thing he can do is go after this Vial, which at this point is fine because we only have one more creature in our hand. Deputy gets the Vial, and we do have a Lord to Vial in. Seeing the value of Kira here, if she was just another 3-drop Merfolk like Reejerey, the Deputy could have exiled that. Speaking of Reejerey, that's a pretty sweet draw. Opponent's really not presenting any kind of clock, so we can really comfortably just tap out here. Gonna get in just with Kira for now. Don't really want the opponent to be able to sort of double block and kill our Island Walk Lord. Opponent draws up to 2 cards. Attack with Thalia with Exalted, definitely just going to take that. So we're setting ourselves up to potentially get some nice value out of these Reejerey triggers, but we need to draw some Merfolk for that to happen. All right, going into my turn. Dismember is pretty good, but nothing really to target right now. So I think we can just activate Mutavault and swing with these 2 guys. Not getting in with Kira because the opponent could be sandbagging a Mantis Rider to try to eat the Kira, and it's really just not worth it. Her protection is so valuable against Reflector Mage and Deputy of Detention that we really, even though it seems unlikely that they have a Mantis Rider since they probably would have played it out and attacked, especially since it has Vigilance, definitely going to play it safe. Swinging in for 7 here. Again, the opponent is really not presenting anything too threatening, and they didn't have anything to Vial in on their end step, or our end step. Okay, on 3 cards, they play out a Meddling Mage. You can kind of see the weakness of the humans deck in this particular example. They've got a bunch of interactive spells with Thalia, or controlling spells with Thalia and Meddling Mage, and if we just have a bunch of beef on our side of the table, we don't really care about that. So you can see Meddling Mage named Lord of Atlantis, again, blindly. Doesn't affect us. Totally happy to take 3 damage here. Our clock is way faster than theirs. Can't cast Dismember right now because Thalia is taxing us, and we really probably don't want to cast it anyway. We'd want to save it for something like a Mantis Rider. Okay, seeing the value of Seize Claim in this game, able to get it down and attack with the Island Walk. Another land, not too amazing, but I guess potentially opens us up to activate Mutavault and hold up mana for Dismember. I think it's just going to be the same exact game plan as last turn. Activate Mutavault, swing with the Island Walkers, leave back Kira, easy 2-turn clock, and the opponent's going to have to do a whole lot to get out of this position. Not quite sure what the 2 cards in hand are, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had, for example, a single Reflector Mage. And they just scooped it up at that point, so Kira, really the MVP there. I've lost so many matches to humans on the back of Deputy Detention, just bouncing multiple Lords, bouncing an AEther Vial when we're stuck on 1 land. This guy's really annoying. But here we're able to establish Island Walk Lord, and then just protect it with Kira. So even though Kira's in the sideboard mostly for like the Jund matchups, the matchups that play tons of removal, she does protect us against the cards that blow us out the easiest against humans. So doing great work here, and you can see I had a couple of nice interactive spells in case they had anything scary. So let's see, currently 3-1 after beating humans. So we beat Infect, we beat Hogaak, and we beat humans. We lost to Scapeshift, and let's go ahead into the 5th and final round and see who my opponent was there. All right, back for round 5 of this Modern League. Currently 3-1, going for the 4-1 against the Purple Mage. This is a nice opening hand. We'd rather be on the play. Opponent opens up Windswept Heath, and immediately I'm thinking, probably Devoted Druid, which is a terrible matchup. Giver of Runes probably means it is in fact Devoted Druid, but it could also be like mono white taxes, so I'm really hoping it's taxes. Force of Negation, pretty bad against taxes, but sort of okay against Devoted Druid combo, so not totally unhappy to draw it there. Okay, so almost definitely Druid combo here. Opponent attacks with Giver of Runes, which is interesting. Opponent probably doesn't know what I'm on yet, so I'm just going to pass with 2 mana up. And if they just get in with Giver of Runes again, maybe I can eat her with Trickster. Opponent has Eladamri's Call. It's pretty annoying. Can't do anything about it. And they do find Devoted Druid. Okay, so now that they have the Druid, they play the Overgrown Tomb untapped. Birds of Paradise, and come on, get in with Giver of Runes. So they didn't attack again. But I still am sort of priced into flashing in Trickster here to get a body on the table. Tapping Giver of Runes, it's really the only reasonable choice. And attack with Trickster, there's not a lot we can do here. So in hindsight here, definitely should have played something on my turn. Probably a Reejerey, potentially Thassa, just because we get to cast Force of Negation for free. But it looks like I chose to sort of bluff during the upkeep, like a Trickster. Still, just going to be better to cast one of these other cards. Slight misstep there. I think passing with the mana up, but I did bluff during their upkeep, like I had another Trickster. To go for Eternal Witness, which looks like they'll probably hit Eladamri's Call, and then I do have up the hard cast Force of Negation. So this allows me to not pitch one of my cards, but card advantage is really not the axis that matters in this matchup here. Opponent untaps Devoted Druid and casts a Duskwatch Recruiter, going down to 1 card. So in this spot now, I'm going to take them off the white mana there. Unfortunately, they have another Bird of Paradise. That can a Bird of Paradise that can make white mana to cast a Vizier of Remedies. So the best I can do here is pause on their upkeep, try to tap the birds down to take them off white mana, prevent the Vizier from getting cast. But of course, the opponent can respond with Giver of Runes if that's what they want to do, to protect the birds. But they're just tapping a whole bunch of mana here to go for Collected Company. And they just naturally find Vizier. And I've played this matchup enough to just know that I should scoop. So I let him tap a bunch of stuff, but Duskwatch Recruiter is kind of the payoff card in itself, because it's going to let them dig through their library, find Walking Ballista, and then just kill us. So in the past, I've gotten salty against this deck and just let them spend 5 minutes comboing off. But most of the time, you really just don't want to waste your own time. Like, they got where they needed to go. It took to turn 5. I didn't present enough of a clock. And, it's sort of okay if Devoted Druid wins in game 1. Let's go ahead to game 2 and check out the sideboarding strategy. Okay, back for game 2 against Devoted Druid. Very difficult matchup. Kind of unfortunate that we're going for the 4-1 and we get paired against them. But, it's going to happen sometimes. I chose to take out 5 of our Seize effects, including all the Seize claims, because they don't redraw like Spreading Seas does. I kept in 2 Spreading Seas because they do tend to go wide, and we often do need Island Walk to punch through. But they have a lot of mana dorks, and it's kind of impossible to really mess with their mana so much. So I think 2 Seas post-board is about where we want to be. I took out 2 Thassas because they're pretty slow against the combo deck. So, and I took out 3 Merrow Reejereys just because, again, they're 3 drops and they can be a little bit slow. So I took out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 cards out. And I would have brought in definitely the 2 Deprives, 2 Echoing Truths, 2 Deprives, 2 Echoing Truths, 3 Dismembers, and then 3 Phyrexian Revokers, which is actually kind of the all-star in this matchup. If you get Phyrexian Revoker on the board naming Devoted Druid, then they absolutely need to deal with that thing in order to execute their game plan. So this is a very strange opening hand, but definitely keepable. Dismember is right up there with Phyrexian Revoker in value in the matchup. The opponent could keep a hand with 1 Devoted Druid, and if we remove that, then they're just stuck playing kind of a bad value game. Playing out like little dorks, Vizier of Remedies. Opponent mulliganed to 5, so hopefully we have a decent chance in this this game. Temple Garden with Giver of Runes. So that's a little bit annoying since it can protect like a Devoted Druid if we try to dismember it, but hopefully we can get there by sort of comboing, trying to tap something with Trickster, they respond with Giver of Runes, and then we can dismember with the ability on the stack. All right, get down to second Aether Vial. That's really all we could do right there. And it looks like they kept the 1-lander and managed to draw into a Birds of Paradise. They certainly would have played this on turn 1 if they had it in hand on turn 1. Both Aether Vials will take up, which means we can start getting creatures onto the battlefield. Third Aether Vial, again, sort of about the best we can do. It's worth it to run out all these vials because they could very easily play like a Knight of Autumn and destroy an Aether Vial. So let's see, they have the Devoted Druid here, which they can finally play on turn 3. And I'm going to go for the play that I was just describing, where I'm going to flash in Trickster, target the Giver of Runes, and it's going to try to give protection to Devoted Druid, but I'm just going to respond with Dismember to get that thing off the board. So even though we have the clunky triple Aether Vial hand, keeping Devoted Druid off the board means that they're at least 2 turns away from comboing off, and with the 2 Lords in hand, I feel pretty comfortable because Devoted Druid does play Plague Engineer, often in the main deck. Another Aether Vial is not what I wanted to draw. But I'm just going to go ahead and slam both of these Lords right now, put any thought of Plague Engineer out of the opponent's mind. Opponent's already down below 10, and they just scooped because they couldn't really do very much with their mulligan to 5 after I dismembered their Devoted Druid. So pretty easy win in game 2. Let's go ahead to game 3 and see how this league wrapped up. All right, back for the third and final game. Unfortunately, the combo player is going to be on the play, so they get sort of the tempo initiative. But fortunately for me, I've got an Aether Vial in combination with Phyrexian Revoker can be pretty strong if the opponent taps to play Vizier with Devoted Druid on the board. I can Vial in Revoker, turn off the Druid, get some more turns. So this is definitely a keepable hand. Opponent also kept 7, so hopefully it's going to be a pretty exciting game 3. Interestingly, they had no 1-drop play. Okay, Vial on the board. We drew into a Lord, which is pretty nice. Take the Aether Vial up. Opponent has no turn 2 play either. So we're going to play the Mutavault. That thing can start attacking as early as next turn. We'll reveal the Benthic Biomancer since it's coming. And as I mentioned in game 2, we're quite happy to have multiple Lords against a deck that runs Plague Engineer out of the sideboard. Okay, going for Eladamri's Call here. We can see what they choose to fetch up. And it is one of those Plague Engineers. Pretty obnoxious. I have to say, I really hate that card, and I think that Wizards were jerks for printing it. Like, were tribes just dominating Modern to the point where, you needed to print like such an extreme answer? So they're going to 2-for-1 me here, killing my Silvergill with Plague Engineer. Also preventing me from vialing in Benthic Biomancer yet, because it would just die immediately. Tick Aether Vial up to 2. Another Phyrexian Revoker is good, but definitely not this turn. Going to vial in a Lord and then play and adapt Ben immediately, so that even if they deal with the Lord, Benthic Biomancer won't just die. So another Lord is excellent. I think I just pitched the second Aether Vial. And even though our creatures are getting their power reduced by Plague Engineer, we've got 2 more Lords in hand, so as long as they don't have another Plague Engineer right now, I think we should be okay. All right, whew. So it's a devoted Druid and apparently no other play. So that's pretty awesome for us because we really want to get these lords down. Another lord is great. I had to think pretty carefully about what I wanted to do here. But with devoted Druid on the table, I chose to get a Revoker out with my mana. It's going to leave Vial up to either bring in another Revoker if they have removal for the first one, or another Lord if they have another Plague Engineer or removal for the first Lord. We do have to really think defensively against this combo deck because if, for example, we just slam 2 Lords with mana and just get AEther Vial right down just to guarantee that Plague Engineer can't kill us, they'll just untap, play Vizier of Remedies, and then just make infinite mana and play Walking Ballista. So getting in with Benthic Biomancer, they don't really have good blocks, but they do line up a block with Plague Engineer here. Pretty spicy, actually. They're going to try to path the Lord here, which would allow him to eat Benthic Biomancer. So that prices me into vialing in another Lord right now. So you can see that these Druid decks sometimes sideboard into a really grindy plan of disruption with Plague Engineers and Path to Exiles. And then it kind of puts their combo plan on the back burner. It doesn't really seem correct to me because it's already turn 4, and often the combo deck will have won by turn 3 in game 1. The fact that they're just making the game go longer and longer doesn't seem like the best plan for them. So, all right, it looks like with the Lord gone, I'm still going to be able to trade with this Plague Engineer. We get an island. This is pretty nice. But the opponent cracks their Windswept Heath, getting a Temple Garden, and they're gonna... So they path the other Lord, which means that Ben is gonna get eaten by this Plague Engineer. So opponent kind of reducing my board to rubble here. Plague Engineer still sitting there. And hoping to dodge another Plague Engineer. We do, but they have a Knight of Autumn, which can destroy this Phyrexian Revoker, which is... obviously not great, since if they have Vizier in hand, they can just go to town now. They play a Verdant Catacombs and attack with Plague Engineer, which was pretty awesome, since they apparently didn't have the Vizier in hand. So I've still got the AEther Vial on the board, still have another Phyrexian Revoker, and Echoing Truth is extremely welcome interaction. I chose to go ahead and play out both of my Lords right now. If they try to combo off by playing Vizier, I can obviously vial in the Revoker, and hopefully that will be enough. Okay, a tapped Godless Shrine. Opponent plays a Forest, and looks like they go into attacks. No attacks to be had. I'm going to vial in Revoker right now. Take advantage of AEther Vial. And the opponent is sitting back on their 1 card. So feeling decent here. It was definitely necessary that I drew 4 Lords in this game. This Plague Engineer is making it really hard to fight. Force of Negation, again, interaction, kind of clunky, since the deck is mostly creatures. But they do have some powerful non-creature spells. We are going to go to attacks here, probably just get in with the Mutavault since we don't want to lose any of our Lords. Opponent's at 15 though, and really all they want is another few turns to draw into their last combo piece. You can see that even though they don't have their combo online yet, they've had pretty sweet draws so far this game. Double Path, Eladamri's Call for Plague Engineer. They've got Devoted Druid, they have a Knight to deal with Revoker or AEther Vial. We're just doing the best that we can. All right, so on my end step, they are going for Court of Calling for X equals 3, which is pretty obnoxious. Obviously, they're trying to go for another Plague Engineer. Alternatively, they could go for another Knight of Autumn to kill the Phyrexian Revoker. They could also go for a Plague Engineer naming Horror, which would prevent any future Revokers from being able to exist on the battlefield, since it would give it -1 toughness. And yeah, it just makes this Force of Negation pretty much incredible. I was saying it's a little clunky, but it's exactly what we needed. Okay, on the opponent's turn, they draw their card. They have no attacks. They just pass back to me. Note that when I was tapped out, the opponent could have cast... this is now 2 turns ago. They drew that Chord of Calling. I was tapped out. They could have cast it, but they let me untap and draw, and I drew into the Force of Negation. So bad play on the opponent's part, I think. Okay, Spreading Seas. The deck is doing exactly what I needed to do. If we're going to close this game out, we need to be able to take advantage of Island Walk. Opponent is going to respond by going for Chord of Calling X equals 2. So there's really not a ton that I could do there. Interesting that they chose not to go for X equals 3. If they went for X equals 3... again, they could get a Knight of Autumn, they could get a Plague Engineer, both of which seem pretty excellent in this situation. But by getting Duskwatch Recruiter, they get to tap 3 and get 1 card, or rather, 3 cards deeper into their deck to find the Vizier of Remedies. And as I mentioned in one of the other games in this match, with Duskwatch on the board, if they manage to find Vizier, infinite mana with Duskwatch is enough to win the game because he'll just dig until they find Walking Ballista. So I drew a Trickster, which is pretty cool. It's something that I can vial in and try to disrupt what they do on their turn, and I'm definitely going to leave up mana for Echoing Truth, since we don't even have a 1-turn clock right now. With an opponent empty-handed, I can just definitely get in for Island Walk. I think it's possible that tapping lower to get another Knight of Autumn to take me off of Island Walk would have been a good option for them as well, since Knight of Autumn can destroy enchantments. But they were choosing to play offensively, which, you know, you can't really blame them for. So they're going to take 4, go down to 8, and let's see. With Trickster vialed in, I've definitely got a lethal attack next turn, assuming I get a next turn. So they're going to go ahead and activate Duskwatch Recruiter here, and let's see what they find. So it looks like they did find a Vizier, but it is currently the only card in their hand. And remember that Devoted Druid is still turned off by Phyrexian Revoker, so opponent needs to find a way to deal with the Revoker in order to combo off, and we've got an Echoing Truth to potentially bounce the Druid. So feeling pretty strong in this position here. We managed to fight through a bunch of interaction. And again, I'm not sure if it's the right way for the combo deck to play to change into such a controlling build. Probably better for them to just go all-out combo again. I mean, we have some options from the sideboard, right, like Dismembers and Echoing Truths, but we really don't have a ton, and it's still a really difficult matchup for us. By giving us all this time with garbage like Plague Engineer, Knight of Autumn, it's all just a little bit too cute, I think. So here's a Collected Company. We know that that was the card they drew for the turn, and they have a Vizier in hand. So they're pretty much hoping to hit like a Knight of Autumn here, I think, to kill the Phyrexian Revoker. And let's see, I don't know, there's some noise going on here. I think my wife is watching a video or something in another room. So if they hit a Knight of Autumn, they can kill the Phyrexian Revoker and then open up their combo. But in response to this, I have a couple things I want to do. I'm going to bounce their Plague Engineer, so obviously making my attack much bigger. And then I'm going to Trickster their Druid, which is going to turn them off of infinite mana this turn. And now even if they hit like Knight of Autumn, destroying the Revoker into Vizier, they can't use Devoted Druid this turn, since its abilities are just turned off. So really not a lot they can do. And they just scooped in that position. So able to get there in round 5 against one of our most difficult matchups. Ending the league 4-1, really unfortunately losing to that 4-color Bring to Light Scapeshift deck. As I mentioned in the matchup, it's kind of favorable for us, I think. We've got counter spells, we've got sort of land disruption with all of the Seize effects. But yeah, I'm happy with a 4-1. We beat, I guess, Infect, Devoted Druid, humans, and a Hogaak deck. So all really powerful, aggressive decks. Thassa didn't really show up in this league so much, but she has been synergizing really well with the Spreading Seas in general. Just didn't see her too much in this particular league. So yeah, please leave your thoughts down below in the comment section. Please subscribe to the channel, and please, if you like these videos, take a second and check out my Patreon page. I've got a bunch of different rewards available at all the different tiers, and I just really appreciate all of you guys who pledge. It makes making these videos so much more exciting for me, since I'm actually getting compensated in some way by all of you. So thanks once again for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next videos where I'll be back with some more Merfolk. I'll see you then. Bye.